Well, today we're going to be replacing these worn brake discs and brake pads. And the first thing you're going to need is a spline set M10. I would recommend hitting these with a good amount of penetrating spray and giving it time to work before you start putting too much force on. I've just coaxed this one out. So I've got some penetrating spray on there and there, and done the carrier behind, and we'll remove or slacken off the brake reservoir cap. So we'll remove these 13mm bolts, 2 of, and carefully wiggle out the caliper using a screwdriver in increments, as we're going to be needing a rewind tool to retract the piston on this one. So we have a brake pad wear sensor, and this one's been a bit stubborn, so I've just gave it a blast of penetrating fluid in there. Well, I've just took a piece of wire just to support the caliper just round the suspension dampener, and that takes the weight off the all too important brake hose. And then follow on with a ratchet. So when you get the last carrier bolt out, everything more or less falls off. I've destructively liberated a stuck brake pad wear sensor by getting a screwdriver in there and just destroying the plastic that latches it on. But the connector is still intact. So we've given the caliper piston a squirt of penetrating fluid in before we start turning things, and it'll just make life a lot easier, and it gives the gator less friction, so it's less likely to fall apart while we compress the piston, which we've got to do to get the new pads in. So I've had a rat through and I've got my rewind kit all set up, and we've got that in the piston, and this is the kit, and it is handed, so sometimes I'll set it up on the wrong hand and then think, oh dear, that's not going to work. So we'll just gingerly turn that, and you can see why I put the penetrating fluid in, just so it works its way behind the dust seal. So we'll just gingerly keep going forwards and backwards, taking great care not to damage that seal. Keep going until you can go no more, and it's fully retracted, that ready for the pads. Now it's very important not to trap that rubber in between the piston and the new brake pad. So what I do now is I have a general clean up on the hub. It's actually easier with a angle grinder with a twisted knot wheel, but you do need a nice smooth surface to put the disc on. And this is the angle grinder with a twisted knot wheel, and I'm going to show you what impression it can make on it. So that's all nice and clean now, and I did do the innards so the wheel shouldn't stick as it's going on and off. So I've cleaned in here with a wire brush, and if the surface of the piston's got any corrosion on, just carefully take it off, taking care not to damage that seal. And the next thing is to check the carrier. What we're going to check is that these slider pins are nice and free and easy, so they should be doing the job as good as possible. So we're going to remove these and give them a clean up, because we didn't get any in the kit, unfortunately. And it's very important to get in these grooves, so we want to clean them out. I'm going to put the angle grinder in with a wheel and clean all this up, get the corrosion out the grooves with a vise, put it in the vise, and then you can use a file to do it, wire brush, etc. But I'm going to use the angle grinder. So I've spent quite a bit of time cleaning up the carrier, and I've used the angle grinder with a twisted knot wheel. You do have to be very careful. I'm quite used to doing it. You don't want to nick these rubber slider pin covers. One other way of doing it, you can get a file in there and just take out a bit of the corrosion. You can see there's a little bit there I couldn't get at with the angle grinder, so we'll give that a pass with a file and clean it up thoroughly. So I've cleaned up these stainless steel parts, and we're going to refit them in there. But before we do that, we're just going to have a a smear of brake grease in just to ward off any corrosion. You can either use brake disc or copper ease. I've never had any trouble with copper ease. Some people say you can get dissimilar metals and some kind of weird reaction, but it's never happened to me. So I'm just going to apply a bit of copper ease on every little surface and scratch it right into the corners, and then we can refit the stainless steel parts. I've also took the time to clean up these parts here just so everything goes back together nice and square. I've just gave that a little pass with a twisted knot wire wheel on there, so everything's nice and square as designed by Volkswagen. And the same goes for the innards. I'm just going to take a wire brush to them to clean any corrosion off, so everything goes back together lovely and square and true. So I'm quite pleased actually. These are the new discs and they are the correct type. And normally when you get them, they're covered in this greasy oil stuff, but these are bone dry, so that saves a job wiping that off with a carburetor cleaner or just going round it with a rag. I apply a bit of grease round here just to ward off corrosion, and also so the hub doesn't stick to the aluminium wheel. That's a popular thing to happen, which is a nuisance if you're ever at the roadside having a breakdown, nervous or mechanical. I always like to put a smear of copper ease on the nut which retains the disc, just to help the next guy out. It could well be me. And the same goes for the carrier retaining bolts, as they're quite awkward to access, so we really don't want them seizing in place. So that's the carrier in place, and onto the brake pads. I do put a bit of copper ease on either side, again just to keep things free and easy. So inserting the brake pad, so I've copper eased that one on 3 sides and the same on this one, and we'll just refit this brake pad. Now what you actually need with a braking system is a bit of, I call it jiggle room, so the pad's free to move up and down, and that's why we fought so hard to remove the corrosion from the carrier, just to keep that 1 to 2 mil jiggle room of preset manufactured play. The corrosion will eat into that and the pad will be solidly locked in, and as a consequence you get a lesser braking power. And onto the caliper. Now what I do is I put a smear of copper ease there, a smear on that side, a smear on that side, and then it'll just help everything settle down to where it wants to be. If it won't go back on, you haven't compressed the piston down far enough. Right, it's now time to use these nice new shiny bolts that I got with the brake pads and nip these up. I'm just going to check that cable in the way of the caliper. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to have a little test rotation just to see if there are anything metallic rubbing. It could be the back plate normally if you hear anything metallic. If you hear a little light noise like we're hearing now, it's just the pads just skimming the surface of the disc. So I'll have a little clean up here and get any surface grease off before we hit the road with it. So we've now rebuilt the other side with the new brake discs, as they should always be fitted in pairs, and our work is not yet done because there's one very important job to do before anything, and that is to pump the brake pedal, get it nice and firm before you move the vehicle. And the other all too important job is to reinstate this cap. Now what I would do, take the vehicle for a drive, just a short drive, and then get the back of your hand and just check the temperature of these wheels. That way if there's any anomalies you are aware of it, and they shouldn't be too warm. So many thanks for watching, and why not subscribe to my channel as many others have done.